Are you looking at interest rates and wondering why they're so high? You're looking at mortgages and wondering why they're sitting at 8 or 9% when they used to be 2.5%? Is it weird to you that the last time you bought a car, you bought it on 7% interest, but now it's at 10% interest for the same money? Do you ever wonder who the Fed is and why they get to decide what happens in the market? In this video, I'm going to explain how the Fed works and how their decision-making paradigm works, and also talk a little bit about how we can make a little bit of money off. So the term Fed refers to the Federal Reserve Bank. Spoiler alert, this is not an institution of the federal government. They have no reserves, and it's not a bank. Quick side note, we should be very leery of things that are named deceptively on purpose. Regardless, the Federal Reserve, or the Fed, is the central banking system of the United States. It was established in 1913 by the Federal Reserve Act. The government says its goal is to provide the country with a safe, secure, and stable economy, but it seems like their goals might be more nefarious. We have in fact been anything but stable and secure ever since its inception. Fun fact, this is actually the third attempt at centralizing the banking system in the United States. The first two attempts all failed miserably. The Federal Reserve is made up of three main components: the Board of Directors, the 12 regional banks, and the FOMC. The Board of Governors, these individuals are in Washington, D.C., and it consists of 7 members who were appointed by the President and then confirmed by the Senate. This board oversees the entire Federal Reserve System. The 12 regional banks are spread all across the United States, and they're all in charge of a different district. They operate semi-independently. Whenever you talk about an independent agency of the government, you should be very leery. These agencies were created through policy. They're hired by the government, fired by the government, and paid by the government, but somehow they're not the government. Each of these banks serves a different district and works directly with commercial banks, the U.S. Treasury, and other financial institutions. Now, the FOMC, or the Federal Open Market Committee, is the last piece of this puzzle. They are responsible for open market operations, which influence money supply. The FOMC consists of the Board of Governors and 5 of the presidents of the regional banks, and they rotate annually. Now, the functions of the Federal Reserve are these. Conducting monetary policy. The Fed manages the supply of money and credit in the economy. They say that they're trying to achieve goals like low inflation and maximum employment. It's not obvious that anything that the Fed does actually affects employment, other than creating these so-called independent agencies. 70 to 80% of all the jobs created in the last 4 years were government jobs. So how do they try to hit their goals? Mainly, they are adjusting the federal funds rate, which means how much money is in the system. They also buy government securities and bonds. They also supervise and regulate banking, ensuring the safety and soundness of the banking system. Also, they ensure the complete and utter lack of competition in the banking industry. They enforce consumer protection laws like the accredited investor rules, which means you can't really invest in anything that has a likelihood of massively going up in value unless you already have $1 million. That's actually a real law. The next thing they do is maintain financial stability. They do this by acting as a lender of last resort. So when big banks get greedy and over-leverage themselves in the system, people get fed up and take their money out of those banks. The bank goes to zero, and the Fed bails them out using printed money, which people end up having to pay for through inflated price. Banks continue to go on making massively risky bets because there is no downside. The Fed is also responsible for facilitating the payment system. Here, the Fed is responsible for overseeing and improving the payment system when it comes to electronic transfers and check clearing. I fail to see how they've made any progress in this space like ever. I mean, it's 2024 and it still takes 3 days to clear a regular payment. I mean, just the other day, I was talking to my sister on FaceTime in Japan for free, and yet they can't figure out how to do an electronic transfer in less than 3 days. The Federal Reserve also issues paper currency, which the federal government doesn't actually have the constitutional authority to do. They were authorized originally by the Constitution to stamp coins. However, they eventually went on to create paper notes through this complicated process of lending to the Federal Reserve, who then creates the paper notes because they're not technically the government. So anyway, rant over. That is what the Federal Reserve is. That is what they do. And here's how you can actually make some money off of this knowledge. Number one, you got to stop saving your money in dollars. This is giving all of your working energy to the government and to the bank. You got to trade all of your working energy into the only 3 things that actually have any long-term value. So number one, opt out of the debt system by paying off all of your debts and not taking out any unless you absolutely have to. Number 2 is buy Bitcoin. Number 3 is buy equity in private companies, not public equities like the stock market and on the stock exchanges. Those things are all heavily regulated by the government, by the Fed, and by the SEC. And by attention, get some of that social media in your life. Guys, that is all I have for today. Have a fantastic week.